Okay, I'm very excited to give this first hybrid talk about the pandemic, and so good to see so many of you here on site and also online. I have to confess that I have talked about this topic several times. So if you have a you know what I'm going to talk about, you have listened to the talk in the past, please just walk out or log out. All right, I don't want to waste your time. Okay, so this is actually not one research, but a project that I've been working on for the last 2-3 years that involves several specific kind of research papers, and some of them are also part of my recent monograph, as I just mentioned. So I will start with the kind of a bit simplified conceptualization of intercultural communication. So I will start with talking about these three terms: cross, inter, and transcultural. I understand, this is a kind of oversimplified distinction, but I hope to give you a perspective of this evolution of intercultural communication. I use these two images that should be very familiar to the Chinese audience who were born in the 1980s, like me. That is the textbook for our secondary school. So what happens is there's a girl, Han Mei, and then one day there's Jim Green who came to China, okay? And then the first stage is, so there's this teacher was saying that, hey, tomorrow there's going to be an American student coming. And so we don't know anything about him, and we don't know anything about American culture. So we need to, today I'm going to tell you, like, when you are talking to Americans, like, what should you pay attention to, right? So how Americans are different from Chinese, things like this, right? So that is the first stage. Basically, it's about thinking about like China and America as oceans apart. We are very different. So the first stage is to understand how are Chinese and American cultures different. So we understand culture as separate entities that are isomorphic with nations. And the purpose is to understand cross-cultural differences. So we all know, for example, Hofstede is about understanding how Chinese culture and American culture are different. So for example, power distance, all this long-term orientation, individualism, all these things. All right, and then we start, okay, now Jim Green is in the class and they start to communicate, right? So that's the second stage. Basically, there's a bridge, okay? And the second stage is about how do Han Mei and Jim communicate. So we still consider culture as stable entities, but now they are interacting. So we will have all kinds of problems, in intercultural communication. So for example, Han Mei probably would ask, how much money does your father make? Something like that, right? Then the teacher would say, hey, we don't do that, things like this. So that is the understanding the process of intercultural encounters. So for example, talking about age and income, then the teacher would say, hey, we can't ask that, things like this, right? Okay, and of course, it's also about the construction of intercultural identities. Sometimes it is relevant, sometimes it is not. So for example, for students studying abroad, sometimes their cultural identities are relevant, but sometimes they are not. So when a foreigner invites a Chinese student to dinner, they would say, hey, we prepared dumplings because you are Chinese, right? And then that Chinese will say, well, I'm not a fan of dumplings. I prefer burgers, right? Things like this, right? So this is the negotiation of cultural identities. And then, sometimes you say, hey, you are Chinese, so you must be, very obedient or something like that, right? So all these things are cultural identities, cultural expectations. And now, third stage, there's a rumor that later they fell in love, Han Mei and Jim Green, and they had a child. And so now that is the third stage. What is the identity about this child, right? So this child is a hybrid. So culture now is transcending national boundaries, is a hybrid. And the purpose here is to understand the characteristics of globalization, of hybridization, heterogeneity, etc. So you see, this is a very simplified mapping of the development of intercultural communication, okay, from the first stage, understanding differences, then starting to be communicating, and then starting to be kind of integrating and mixed as one. And if you think about Hong Kong, you would say this is a perfect manifestation of transculturality. You know, what I like about Ceihua's restaurant is that, you know, sometimes I say, you want Malay food, go there, right? And if you want European food, you can also go there. And if you want Korean food, everything, right? They have everything. And what is interesting further about this restaurant is that everything tastes Ceihua, right? So it's not like that, you know, the food at Ceihua, the Malay food, you know, is the same as the food in Malaysia, or the Korean food there is the same as South Korea. It's all the same. It's very similar. Right? It's just a kind of a mixture, okay, of the Korean style with local ingredients, you know, by local chef and everything, right? So that is the essence of transculturality, where we have all these kind of integrated hybridities. And that leads us to this constructivist view of culture. What is culture? It is not unitary static identity that is isomorphic with countries. It is not just out there, but manifested in and constructed through various social professional practices. And if you think about these social and professional practices, they are multimodal. So communication, social practice is multimodal, be it face-to-face communication or media communication. So we may not be able to say the whole picture of culture and intercultural communication if we just focus on language. And so I argue investigating multimodal resources is an imperative next stage for cultural discourse studies and intercultural communication research, particularly in the new media context. So what can multimodal analysis do? So based on these three dimensions, we can do cross-cultural comparison. We can understand the complex multimodal manifestations of cultural differences beyond the well-known cultural dimensions. So we consider them as different, but we are saying that the difference is not simply like power distance and low power distance and so on. It's more complex and nuanced than that. And second, the intercultural interaction. So we need to analyze the multimodal communication between participants from different cultural backgrounds. So the process of what actually happens in intercultural encounters. And third is analyzing transcultural communication, understanding the hybridity and heterogeneity of cultures manifested in multimodal discourses in the globalized and digital world. So you say, it's these three stages, considering them as separate and different, and then as interacting, and then as mixed, as hybridized. I'll just give you a very simple demonstration of what we can do in terms of cross-cultural communication, and also and then focus on transcultural communication. So in cross-cultural comparison, we need to set aside any a priori assumption about cultural difference and ask instead how culture and cultural differences is produced and manifested in multimodal discursive practice. So we can't assume that American culture is individualism and Chinese is collectivism and then test it. Well, that is valid, you can do that. But from my discourse analysis perspective, then we don't have that hypothesis. We don't make that assumption. The aim is to investigate the nuanced cultural differences beyond the simplified essentialist dimensions, like power distance, individualism. So, for example, in this case study, we can understand how universities promote themselves in China and in the US. So we can collect, for example, 100 top universities from China and US, and we can use visual analysis, and we do quantitative and qualitative analysis to find patterns of similarity and difference, and then we explain the patterns in relation to culture. So some examples. So you can say these are from the top universities in China. So you can see what the students are doing there. Basically, they are listening. So good students in China are always listening. So here, listening, and even when they are outdoors, they are still listening. So that is what is expected. Teachers are they have the knowledge and they impart the knowledge to students. And then in American universities, you won't see them listening. They are getting their hands dirty. They are performing, they are doing all kinds of things except listening, right? So that is a very interesting difference, right? That perhaps is not readily explained by like cultural difference or individualism and so on. So when we interpret the difference, we cannot simply draw upon the essentialist cultural dimensions to say that, okay, say this reflects this and that. We need to provide new understandings about cultural difference beyond existing dimensions. So our purpose is to say, is not to say that, okay, say this confirms Hofstede or not. We're saying that beyond Hofstede, what else can we understand about culture? So for example, about different educational system, different educational philosophies, from the Confucius tradition and the Socrates tradition, right? And then different branding strategies, and of course, ultimately leading to the variegated marketization of higher education. We can see both universities in both countries, they are trying to promote themselves, but in different ways, right? So that indicates the impact of the new liberalized higher education, but that new liberalization is variegated. It is manifested in different ways, in different contexts. So neoliberalism is one thing. The other thing is post-feminism, for example, how that is manifested in the West and in the Chinese context. All right, so now I will focus on transculturality. It invites us to consider the intermingling of presumably distinct cultures and the blurred lines between them. In the globalized world, individuals, communities, and societies increasingly draw from expanded, tremendously polarized cultural repertoires in their everyday life practice and imaginary. And that leads to the formation of a transcultural identity, which is a continuous coherence of traits, beliefs, and practices that transcend geographic or historical boundaries. It is an embodied situation of cultural polarity and hybridity, characterized by the entanglement of different cultural values and elements. So what I'm particularly interested in is how transculturality is not just naturally occurring, is not fact there. It is actually a resource, is a capital and communicative strategy. So think about music, film, food, and clothes. For example, these two guys, famous musicians from Taiwan, and they are well known for their combination, integration of the Chinese elements and the Western elements in their music. So they created this unique style of music. Yeah, so I think most of you should know them. And this is another example how they integrated the traditional Hanfu style with the modern design. And this is another interesting example, Godiva chocolate, but Godiva is now making mooncakes. So that is a transculturality as a capital, as a branding strategy. And the recent examples about Multi, I think many of you would know this, right? So I just added this example today. I think this is a perfect example of transculturality. You say, this is a Chinese wine, baijiu, right? And this is a Western, essentially, right, coffee. So now we have Multi coffee. And what is more crazy is multi-chocolate. So, you can't imagine this company making traditional Chinese wine. They're making chocolate. And this is what is also interesting is how they brand this kind of transculturality, how they use this as a strategy for marketing. So transculturality is agentic. It's transformational capitals to be mobilized and exploited for commercial success. So the capitals are strategically deployed to achieve specific communicative purposes in specific contexts. So like this one, this is saying that it's like, okay, multi is this is Duve chocolate, right? And this is multi, the wine. And then it's like, this is a girl. They were saying that we won't hide anymore. We are in love, something like that. So you say the kind of personification of these two products, right? And how they are married and become a hybrid. So that is the use of transculturality as a branding, a marketing strategy. And that is essentially supercultural creativity. So you can see, if you think about many products in contemporary China, and of course, including in the Hong Kong context, it's all about combining the West and the East in creative ways, right? And that forms our unique transcultural identity. Okay, so I will go further into transculturality in contemporary China, which is what my book is essentially about. So transcultural negotiations between tradition and modernity and between China and the West is the hallmark of contemporary China. On the one hand, China has modeled on the developed West to marketize its economic system and enthusiastically participated in the West-led globalization, embracing the new liberal philosophy in all aspects of society. And on the other hand, they have tried to stick to its political system and revive Chinese culture and traditions. And how does this work? Right? So they are not contradictory. They are actually coherent in a way, right? So I'm going to show you how this is represented as a kind of branding strategy, as I said, as a kind of a capital in national branding. So I'm not going to talk about the backgrounds of nation branding, but I'm just going to emphasize transculturality as a key feature of China's national image in the branding promotional film. So I developed this multimodal analysis approach to transcultural identity analysis, where I consider national image as a set of evaluative attributes that are realized through multimodal resources. So the simple questions we ask are, what attributes are represented? How are they constructed? And then why, in a way, okay, why they are represented in such a way. Okay, and we will focus on the plurality, the hybridity and entanglement of different elements. So I developed this framework for analyzing the filmic construction of evaluative attributes. I'm not going to elaborate on this. If you are interested, you can find more from my book. But just this part, okay, how images can provoke the evaluative attributes. So we understand about entailment, about facial expression, and so on. So others are a bit more abstract. But this provoke is, cinematic metaphors, in film, like very often they juxtapose different things, like the killing of human beings with the killing of cattle, for example, to say that, that's a classic example, right? So to say that human beings are being slaughtered just like animals. So that is the kind of cinematic metaphor that I refer to. But we see a lot of this kind of comparison and juxtaposition of tradition and modernity. So, for example, in the film, you will say the first shot of the sequence features a group of elderly practicing Tai Chi sword in front of a red Chinese-style building, which is followed up by another shot of people in ballroom dance. And these juxtaposition of tradition and modern forms of activity in parallel shots provoke the harmonious coexistence of Chinese and Western cultures. So yes, some people, they like Tai Chi, they can do that. If you like dancing, then perfectly fine. So they coexist peacefully, but do not just coexist in different shores. They also coexist in a single short. So they highlight how the profound Chinese culture is inclusive enough to accommodate and assimilate Western things, and at the same time maintains its own essence. For example, how this Starbucks coffee is literally accommodated in a Chinese style building. So there are a lot of arguments about, for like a few years ago, can we have Starbucks coffee in the Forbidden City, for example, right? So that's like so incompatible, right? But now it does not seem to be an issue anymore, right? So we can say this kind of how they were constructing Chinese culture as being very inclusive and accommodating Western things, but we are still maintaining our own identity with this traditional Chinese performance here. And further transcending cultural boundaries. So we can say we see from juxtaposition, some are dancing, some are playing Tai Chi in different shots, and then to within one shot, and then to the evaluation of the appeal of Chinese culture to the younger generation of foreigners. Such images are prevalent in the promotional film and have been iconized in China's international communication. For example, we see a lot of foreigners learning Chinese opera, foreigners using chopsticks awkwardly, right? Foreigners speaking Chinese awkwardly, right? But then they are considered as being cute and lovely, and all this wearing traditional Chinese clothes and so on. And this is a typical example. You can say this foreign boy is learning to play a Chinese form of sports. And what is interesting about this form of sport is that it is called Tai Chi ball, is that it is itself a recent invention in which integrates the ancient Tai Chi with modern sports such as tennis, badminton, and table tennis. So you see the integration of the tradition and the modality in different types of activities, like foreigners learning chopsticks and so on, eating Chinese food, singing Chinese songs. So we can say in this promotional film, a transcultural identity is constructed. We see the coexistence of Chinese and Western cultures. We see how Chinese culture is accommodating Western culture, and we see how Chinese culture is appealing to foreigners. Okay, and we see how the Chinese culture is integrated with Western culture to create new activities and artifacts. So it's not that okay, we are refusing to change. Okay, so we see a lot of so we say Chinese culture or culture is always a dynamic existence, right? So you say that the formation of Chinese culture itself throughout history is always the result of the integration between different races, ethnic groups, and so on. So that is culture is always interacting. And then moving to new media communication, I will talk about several examples in social media. So they create unique opportunities for the discursive construction of hybridized cultures. And we are interested in how organizations and individuals use social media to create new virtual cultural spaces that are characterized by plurality, hybridity, and creativity. So I'm going to show you two examples, okay, of how cities, institutions, and individuals are promoted on social media, okay, on TikTok, okay, on other types of live streaming and so on. So the example here is Xi'an, is an ancient city in China. I think most of you know that. When we think about Xi'an, right, you probably would think about this image, right, the old buildings, right, okay, or these kind of buildings, right. So we have two types of cities in China. One is this ancient, and one is modern. The problem is Xi'an does not want to be perceived as just these. They also want to be considered as a metropolitan city, right? So this is essentially what Xi'an is like. You see the integration of different cultures here. So you see, for example, these tall buildings here that are, are modern development. but we also see these ceilings that are Chinese. Yeah, and we say this. We see here, for example, New York World. We see English language here, and then that is basically in the city landscape. Okay, then we see the integration of Chinese and the modern, right? The modern, the Western, and the traditional, the Chinese. You see how they are integrated in the city design. And on TikTok, then again, my approach, I consider identity as evaluative attributes. So what are the attributes? And I consider identity as being constructed by multimodal resources. So how are they constructed? So how are they constructed? I developed this framework to look at the construction of transcultural attributes, whether an attribute is articulated in language directly or indirectly or embedded in nonverbal resources through character design or visual design. So I will not elaborate on this. If you're in social semiotics, you probably would be familiar with this. So the purpose of having this framework is to make my analysis more systematic and reliable. So like when I have an image, I say, okay, this construction modality, then it's not just based on my impression, like in content analysis, interview, and so on. So when I say this construction modality, I can tell you why. I can tell you how modernity is constructed from these and these and these here. So that is to say, to make the connection between my interpretation and the textual details more transparent, right, more explicit, so that we can produce more reliable analysis. So like different people, if they follow the same framework, they can come up with similar interpretations. So this is not surprising. We see the mixture of global and modern attributes and also Chinese and traditional attributes. But I'm just going to give you some examples of internationalization and localization. So you see how this, so like this is a foreigner, and then he was saying that I'm spending the Chinese New Year in Xi'an. And then you can see everything is Chinese, all the red and all these things and everything, right? So basically, aside from the face and the language, everything is Chinese. So it's a perfect mixture of Chinese and the West, right? And these are foreigners saying Chinese sounds, Chinese popular sounds, and this is enjoying Chinese food, okay, and so on. So they say this how these foreign faces, okay, are doing Chinese activities. So you see there's this mismatch, right, between the participant and the activity. Yeah. So and that creates this transculturality. And we also see this crossing not just geographic boundaries, but also boundaries in time. This time travel examples here. You say this is the modern, and then they're going back, right? So now this is they suddenly find themselves in ancient China upon waking up. Okay, yeah. So they are signaled clearly in character depiction through physical features and actions. And we also say the cartoonized historical legend page characters like ancient warriors, these terracotta warriors. Okay, they travel through time to the ancient, to the modern world. Like this, these two girls are dancing, and then suddenly this terracotta warrior shows up. It's a bit spooky, scary, right? So, but anyway, in that context, it's fun, right? Okay, so that's transcending the boundary between modern and ancient. And we also say how tradition is being modernized. This is something that is very popular in the Chinese culture, how the Chinese government is encouraging, modernizing traditional culture, right? So all the traditional culture like Peking opera, like Tai Chi, they are considered as being boring and old-fashioned and so on. So what the government is trying to do is the so-called revival of traditional Chinese culture. So you would say the mixture of traditional elements and modern design here, modern technology. Yeah. So that itself can be a very interesting research topic. If you say, the website of Forbidden City, you will see a lot of such examples. So an old emperor, like from Tang Dynasty, Qing Dynasty, is wearing modern clothes and talking in a funny way, things like this, right? So that is the recreation, revival of traditional Chinese culture by combining traditional Chinese culture with modern elements, using modern technology and so on, so as to engage the younger generation. All right, so now we can summarize that transculturality is used as a symbolic capital for city branding. Okay, so we see the representation of how Xi'an attracted so many foreigners, and we say the creative recreation of the past as trendy cultural artifacts. Okay, and that is essentially connected with this notion of symbolic economy and Wang Hong economy, Wang Hong city image, and so on. So this kind of study is essentially cross-disciplinary, right? So where you need to refer to studies on like symbolic economy, in post-industrial kind of development, right? And also sociological cultural studies about Wang Hong city and so on. But what we do is we provide a more empirical, explicit analysis of what the discourse tells us. Yeah, not just how we interpret the discourse based on our common sense, right? Or theories about the sociology, cultural studies and so on. All right, so now I move to the third case, that is the identities of individual people. So this is one of the most famous cyber celebrities a few years back, and not anymore. So when we did the study, so we will look at her transcultural identity. So the analytical framework is similar, but here we expanded our data and we try to do a multimodal content analysis. That is a combination of multimodal analysis with content analysis. So we first code and classify the attributes. Okay, so if we have like maybe 1,000 videos, and then like in advertising as well, right? We need to code all the attributes. So that is the content aspect. But the multimodal aspect is we do not just code the attributes. We also look at how they are realized through multimodal resources. So we also look at, so this is a similar framework, right? So when we have an attribute, like for example, filial piety, then we want to ask, how is this attribute realized in her verbal and non-verbal performance? And then we also find this mixture of transcultural identities, the mixture of tradition and modernity, but we see more attributes, the post-feminist attributes of individualism, professionalism, appearance, cheerfulness, and so on. But what I will focus on is not tradition and modernity as two separate aspects, but rather as being integrated. So I'll just give you several very interesting examples to say how the attributes actually integrate, they work together to construct one single attribute. So like in this one, in this speech act here, she was saying, work hard to make money and take good care of grandpa. So that's a very interesting utterance here. You say, traditionally, girls don't need to work hard to make money. So if a girl says, I want to work hard and make money, so that's, this financial independence and so on, that's very modern attribute, right, in the Chinese context. But then I'm not making money to enjoy my life. I want to make money to take good care of my grandfather. So that is not very Western, right? So you don't make money to take care of your grandfather, Steph, no, right? No. So so this is a very interesting mixture here. How the behavior, this intention of making money is to it's legitimized in a way by the traditional value of filial piety, right? So we see this how traditional value is used to justify the modern attribute. Yeah, if you just say I want to make a lot of money, then people will say, "Hey, shame on you! You just so materialistic, so on." But then if you say, "Hey, I make money to take care of my grandfather," then wow, you are great, right? So that's very noble, right? So a very moral kind of girl, right? So that is this kind of a justification, a legitimation. You can say she's performing the modern attribute. She's not in her hometown. She's in Shanghai. She's making big money, but then she was saying her behavior is legitimized by a traditional attribute. And then another one also very interesting. That is purity for Chinese girl. This is very important. So, so what happens here is there's in live streaming, there's a man, the audience, asked her to wink, and then she was saying she did wink really well, but then she said, "Oh, that's shameless. That's shameless, right? I really have no idea how to wink, right? Flirtatiously, right? But she did a perfect job. But then she was saying that, no, I can't do that. That is a very interesting kind of mixture of mitigation of the behavior, right? So if you just wink and say, "Hey, I'm so good at it," people will say, "Oh no, that's not pure. That is that girl image is not is not." that, right? So, but then she was saying that I'm doing it, but at the same time, I can't do it. I'm just doing this for you, right? So this is my first time. Then, wow, right? So, that's so this is the active and android exploitation of purity and seductiveness for empowerment. So you can say what she's doing here is skillfully exploiting tradition and modality to engage the viewers, right? So, the men's kind of a state of mind, they say that they want the girl to be like kind of slutty and pure, right? So something like that, right? So that combination. And apparently this girl, this Wang Hong girl, she knows that very well. Yeah, so she exploits that to construct her identity. So we see this entanglement of tradition and modernity combined to construct a transcultural identity for commercial success. So that's very much the similar with multi and Godiva, right? Okay. And the next attribute, let's just look at this quickly, is how traditional attributes and the modern attributes are actually reconciled with each other. So let's look at this example. She was saying that you can read this. She was saying that she was a university teacher, which was considered as a perfect job. And then one day she told her father that I don't want to be a university teacher anymore. I want to be a live streamer. And then her father was saying, that's crazy, right? So you have a perfect steady job for a girl, and now you want to be a entertainer. That is just insane, right? And then she said, I did not want to give up. So you see, that's her strength of the character. I want to be a singer. I want to be a live streamer. Then I did not listen. I did not obey my father. Then she was very persistent. She asked so you say that's why she said I want to make money and give my grandpa, right? So she asked her grandfather, and grandpa was very good to me, and he asked if I really love music, and said if I decided to do it, I should really just do it well, right? So then he gave me 2,000, and then which he saved for a long time, so touched, and this. So you can see here, she's not a hardcore rebel. This, hey, I have to do this, and if you don't let me do this, I will run away from home. It's not like that. Her strategy is to persuade her parents and grandparents. So that is also the right attitude for young people, right? So you can't be rebellious, you can't have your own opinion, but you have to make it work. You can't just, say I will run away from home. So we see the reconciliation of tradition and modernity. Yeah, she was able to pursue her dream and be an entertainer, a singer, but then that was also accepted by her parents. And later, I don't have the image here, but later actually, she invited her grandfather on the show. Okay, and then her grandfather was playing that erhu thing, and then she was singing, and so it's all a very happy family thing, right? So you can say how things got kind of reconciled, and it's perfect ending. So yeah, that seems to be very well in line with this government ideology, right? So you can pursue your own dreams, but you have to persuade your parents, right, and be accepted and so on. And then another one is the emphasis of personal taste through wardrobe choice. But here, this example is particularly interesting. This cosplay is a modern behavior. But what is interesting here is what is being cosplayed is the traditional Chinese character Chang'e during the Mid-Autumn Festival. So that there's a legendary girl who flies to the moon, and that is why I don't know the story, but that's why we have the Mid-Autumn Festival, right? So, but anyway, it's a quite romantic story, and then she was playing this traditional Chinese Chang'e, and then this Chang'e costume, of course, is also modernized. So you see how a tradition and modernity works together here. So this cosplay, of course, is a way of celebrating individuality and modernity. But she makes an innovative attempt to cosplay as a traditional legendary Chinese figure on Mid-Autumn Festival. She reconfigures the traditional image of Chang'e by modernizing the traditional Chinese costume and hairstyle, westernizing her makeup style, and putting up a cute fashion. So you see how traditional Chinese and the Western modern are combined in this performance here. So we say the integration of tradition and modernity. So we see the complex ways in which tradition and modernity can interplay, and they may coexist. They may be used to one tradition may be used to justify the modernity, and tradition is used to mitigate the modernity, and they may be integrated. So this provides us new understanding about Chinese femininity as transcultural phenomenon. People talk about the impact of post-feminism on Chinese women. And people talk about, of course, they are also influenced by traditional Chinese culture. But we do say this, we can say the identity is essentially transcultural. It's not just traditional, not just post-feminism. So we see the modern attributes of individualism, career-orientedness, and so on. But these are entangled with traditional values of filial piety, inferiority, purity, and so on. So these are combined in a way that so they are united for commercial success. So in a way, the neoliberalism is a kind of uniting force, right? So kind of driven by the purpose of getting more fans and making more money and so on. So she was able to combine these values. So with neoliberalism is this underlying force to combine tradition, to perpetuate some, for example, traditional values like inferiority and filial piety. We say traditional values are not denounced or rejected. Instead, they are embraced and often used to legitimize or mitigate modern values. But we say here, transculturality is used as asset and communication strategy to construct her legitimacy, right? So making money in a flirting is to gain market legitimacy. But at the same time, she has to gain social legitimacy, from the government, right? Then the government would like you to be pure and inferior and so on. So this is gaining market legitimacy as well as social legitimacy. So that can provide us with a nuanced understanding about characteristics of Chinese femininity, which sheds new light on gender politics in the cyberspace in China and enriches the understanding of post-feminism as multifaceted and variegated transnational phenomenon. So the same as we're talking about neoliberalism, university marketization, and here about post-feminism. So they are Western developed concepts, but we need to study them as multifaceted, variegated transnational phenomena. They manifest their own unique features in different contexts. All right, so here, I think my time is almost up. I would close by arguing that transcultural multimodal discourse, especially new media, is an exciting area for research. So instead of focusing on cross or intercultural scenarios, the approach considers discourse as inherently cultural, that is inherently transcultural, integrating different cultural elements. So that is, we don't have to study, compare China and the US, or studying like Chinese students studying in UK to look at intercultural communication. Even studying discourse within China, within a certain place, we can also understand about culture. And that provides new understanding about the nuances of cultural values, cultural changes, and cultural interaction. Okay, so we see how different values, different attributes, they are used to legitimize each other, and mitigate each other, and so on. The different ways of interaction. And of course, we also can provide a new understanding about the multimodal manifestation and construction of culture. So we started with this argument that culture is not just out there, it is constructed through our performance. So based on our analysis of how they construct their performance, the verbal and non-verbal performance, we can understand how culture is manifested. And we can also explore how new media impacts on transculturality in like business, education, live streaming, all kinds of contexts, right? So basically what has changed? There are a lot of studies about, for example, advertising, about education, business communication, how things have changed when they move to social media. Like if you look at social media advertising, how they are different from traditional print advertising. And let's say e-commerce, right? How e-commerce discourse is different from traditional business transactions. And of course, I argue here that these kind of communication, they are also fundamentally transcultural. So we can investigate how transcultural repertoires are strategically selected and multimodally designed as cultural capitals, as assets in professional communication in various business, education, entertainment, and so on, in all kinds of contexts. That essentially connects us back to, the center for professional communication, right? Basically, we need to understand all these new changes, and we need to be able to make sense of them, but also at the same time to make effective use of all these resources for effective communication. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.